You stand at the threshold of your own soul, sensing that something invisible yet powerful has taken hold of you. I see it in the way your eyes carry the weight of pain that is not yours, in how your breath is shallow with burdens that belong to others. Empathy, when unhealed, does not remain a gift. It becomes a chain, linking you to the wounds of the world, making you a prisoner of every cry, every shadow, every fragment of suffering that drifts across your path. You believe this is love, but it is not love, it is compulsion. It is the unconscious desire to heal in others what you have refused to confront in yourself, until you dare to descend into the depths of your own wound. You will remain a servant to the unspoken pain of others, bowing to it as though it were your master. The empathic soul, unawakenet, often confuses sensitivity with sacrifice. You think that absorbing another's pain will save them, but in truth, it only dissolves your own boundaries until you no longer know where you end and the other begins. This is not compassion. It is the shadow's distortion of compassion. True compassion does not mean drowning in the suffering of the collective. It means seeing the suffering for what it is, holding it with presence, without allowing it to devour you. But this discernment requires inner healing. It requires the courage to stand alone before the mirror of your own unconscious and ask, why do I keep offering my soul as a sponge for the pain of the world? When you refuse to heal, you become an archetype without agency, a living vessel for other people's projections. This is the archetype of the wounded healer who has not yet learned that healing must begin within. Every empath, every sensitive soul is born with the seed of the wounded healer archetype. It calls to you in dreams and in moments of deep silence, reminding you that your task is not to endlessly mend others, but to confront the primal wound inside yourself. For what you cannot face within will haunt you through the faces of others. Their suffering will mirror your own, and you will be pulled like a tide, unable to resist the compulsion to rescue, because deep down you are trying to rescue the child within you who was left abandoned in the dark. The collective unconscious is filled with currents of unhealed pain. If you do not know your own shadow, these currents will pull you under, and you will believe that every emotion you feel belongs to you, but much of what you carry is not yours. The empath without boundaries becomes a slave to the collective shadow. You find yourself weeping for wounds you cannot name, carrying anxieties that have no origin in your personal history, because the collective unconscious is speaking through you. You are like a radio, tuned to every frequency of suffering, and without healing, you have no power to choose which station plays in your mind. I have spent my life observing the subtle dialogue between the conscious and the unconscious, the dance of archetypes, the patterns that bind and liberate the soul. And I tell you this, the empath who does not heal will be used by these forces, unconsciously serving as a vessel for the world's unresolved grief. You think you are being kind, but in truth, you are caught in a pattern of possession. Others will sense your open energy and pour their shadows into you. They will project their pain, their guilt, their unresolved trauma, and you will absorb it like a sponge. mistaking it for your duty. But no one benefits from this, for when you take on what is not yours, you deny the other person the necessary encounter with their own shadow. You become a substitute for their transformation. And in doing so, you lose yourself. Healing begins the moment you recognize that your empathy is not a shield of light, but a mirror reflecting your own unfinished work. You must turn inward and descend into the underworld of your psyche, into the cave where the forgotten parts of you live. This descent is not easy. It is like entering the realm of dreams where nothing is linear, where images and symbols speak in a language older than the mind. You will meet your shadow there, the part of you that you have exiled, the part that feels unworthy of love. The more you resist this encounter, the more you will be enslaved by the pain of others. For you cannot truly stand in the presence of another's suffering until you have made peace with your own. Let me tell you a story, a dream I once heard from a patient, which illustrates the fate of the unhealed empath. She dreamt that she was walking through a vast field of mirrors. In each mirror, she saw not her own face, but the faces of those she loved, twisted with pain, fear, and anger. She tried to touch the mirrors to comfort them. But with every touch, the glass melted and their wounds appeared on her own skin. Soon she was covered in cuts and bruises, bleeding from wounds she had never experienced in waking life. She woke up in terror, unable to distinguish her own emotions from those of the people around her. This dream was not just hers, it belongs to many of you. It is the dream of the empath who has become the wounded reflection of everyone else. When you heal, the mirrors change. You still see the suffering of others, but it no longer pierces you. You are able to hold space for their wounds without bleeding yourself dry. This is a transformation of the wounded healer archetype into the wise healer. The wise healer does not carry the pain of others. Instead, they help others see the truth of their own pain. But this requires a radical act of self-awareness. It requires you to stand before your own reflection and ask, what wound in me keeps attracting the suffering of others? What part of me is still longing to be saved? The path of individuation, the journey toward wholeness, demands that you reclaim your energy from all the places where it has been scattered. Every time you overgive, every time you carry emotions that are not yours, you are abandoning a part of yourself. Individuation calls you back. It whispers, come home. There is nothing noble in martyrdom if it leaves you empty. The empath who refuses to heal is trapped in a false sense of virtue, mistaking self-neglect for love. But true love begins with the courage to meet yourself fully, to hold your own pain, to become intimate with your own shadow. Only then can you serve others from a place of strength rather than sacrifice. You may ask, how do I begin this healing? It begins by noticing where your energy flows without your consent. Whose pain do you carry when you wake in the morning? Whose voice is whispering in your mind when you feel exhausted? Ask yourself, is this fatigue truly mine? Or am I carrying the weight of someone else's unspoken suffering? Begin to separate what belongs to you from what belongs to others. This is the first act of liberation. It is like peeling away layers of fog until you finally see the shape of your own soul. Dreams will guide you. if you listen. They are the secret language of the unconscious, revealing the archetypal patterns that rule your life. Pay attention to the recurring symbols, the figures that visit you in the night. Perhaps you dream of water that is always overflowing, drowning everything in its path. This may be the voice of your emotions, warning you that your boundaries are dissolving, or perhaps you dream of carrying strangers on your back, struggling under their weight. This is the image of the unhealed empath, who becomes the mule of the collective, bearing what is not theirs to bear. But dreams also carry the medicine. If you see a figure of light standing firm amidst chaos, it is the self, the archetype of wholeness, calling you to return to center. Healing does not mean closing yourself off or hardening your heart. It means learning to stand in the storm without becoming the storm. It means knowing that you can love deeply without absorbing the pain of those you love. The path forward is not about rejecting empathy, but about purifying it. The raw, unhealed form of empathy is porous, uncontrolled, and easily manipulated. The healed form is luminous, discerning, and anchored in the self. When you heal, your empathy becomes a tool of wisdom rather than a weapon turned against yourself. You are no longer pulled into every vortex of suffering. Instead, you hold a steady presence that allows others to find their own way out of darkness. There is an ancient truth hidden in all mystical traditions. No one can heal another without first healing themselves. You cannot give what you do not possess. If you carry unhealed wounds, they will bleed into your relationships, shaping every act of giving into an unconscious plea to be seen and loved. Healing breaks this cycle. It transforms empathy from slavery into sovereignty. Healing, my friends, is not a linear path, nor is it a destination where you arrive and declare yourself complete. It is an ever-unfolding spiral, leading you deeper into the layers of your own psyche, unearthing truths that the conscious mind would rather avoid. When you are an empath who refuses this descent, the unconscious will force its lessons upon you in the form of endless entanglements with other people's pain. You will find yourself in relationships where you are the eternal caretaker, constantly giving, constantly rescuing, but never truly seen. This pattern is not random. It is the shadow's design, a mirror of the unhealed child within you, still longing for the recognition it never received. I have often said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is especially true for the empathic soul. Your sensitivity is not merely a gift, it is a doorway into the collective unconscious. But if you refuse to explore your own shadow, that doorway becomes a trap. You will be swept into the currents of other people's emotions, feeling what they cannot bear to feel, and mistaking this for love or duty. You will lose your center, and your own voice will fade into the chorus of collective suffering. I have seen countless individuals suffer from this invisible enslavement. They come to me with stories of exhaustion, of feeling drained after every interaction, of carrying the sorrow of friends, family, even strangers. They believe this is a sign of compassion, but I tell them that true compassion is never exhausting. True compassion is born of strength and clarity, not of martyrdom. If your empathy leaves you empty, then it is not compassion. It is a wound speaking through you. It is the unhealed part of you that seeks validation by absorbing the pain of others, believing that by fixing them, you will finally fix yourself. But no one can fix you. Healing is not given by the world, it is claimed from within. The empath who refuses to heal will live in a cycle of resentment, feeling both indispensable and invisible, both powerful and powerless. You will be drawn to people who feed on your energy, because unconsciously you are seeking to repeat the wound every time you overextend, every time you silence your own needs to meet the needs of another. You are reenacting the moment when your own pain was ignored. It is as if you are trying to rewrite history, hoping that by saving others, someone will finally come and save you. This cycle must be broken. And the breaking is not gentle. It requires a confrontation with the deepest archetypes of your psyche. The shadow, the inner child, the anima or animus, all will emerge to test your resolve. You may feel anger rise within you, anger at the years you have spent in servitude to the pain of others. Do not repress this anger. It is the voice of your true self, demanding to be seen. Anger, when faced with honesty, can become a catalyst for transformation. It is the fire that burns through illusions, so that tells you where your boundaries must be rebuilt. Imagine for a moment that your psyche is a great house. Each room holds a part of your soul. For years, you have left your own rooms untended while hosting endless guests, allowing them to wander freely, even to rearrange your furniture because you believed this was kindness. But now the house is in disarray. Your inner world is cluttered with the emotions of others, and you no longer recognize which feelings are yours. Healing is the act of reclaiming your house. It is walking through each room, clearing out what does not belong, and gently inviting your true self to return home. Dreams often reveal this process with startling clarity. You may dream of being in a house that is falling apart, or a house filled with strangers who refuse to leave. These dreams are not random, they are symbols of your own boundaries, or lack thereof. When you begin to heal, the dreams change. You might find yourself repairing the house or discovering hidden rooms filled with light. The unconscious speaks in these images, guiding you toward wholeness, but you must be willing to listen. The empath's healing journey is also a journey of shadow integration. The shadow is not evil. It is simply the part of you that has been rejected or forgotten. For the empath, the shadow often holds anger, selfishness, and the primal instinct to say no. These traits are not negative, they are essential. Without them, you cannot maintain boundaries. Without them, you remain open to every intrusion, every projection. When you integrate your shadow, you learn to say no with clarity and love. You learn that it is not your job to carry the pain of others. You can stand beside them, offer compassion, but you no longer bleed for them. There is an archetypal pattern here, one that I have seen repeated in myths across cultures, the descent into the underworld. In Greek myth, it is Persephone taken to Hades. In Christian tradition, it is Christ descending into hell. These stories are not merely historical or religious, they are psychological. The empath must also face the dark underworld of their psyche. Only by facing the darkness within can they emerge with the strength to face the darkness in others without being consumed. I often speak of the self, the central archetype of wholeness, the divine blueprint within each of us. The self is not found by clinging to the light alone. It is found by embracing the totality of your being, the light and the dark, the joy and the suffering. For the empath, this means recognizing that your sensitivity is not just a gift but also a challenge. It will destroy you if you remain unconscious of its power. But if you bring it into awareness, if you ground it in the self, it will become your greatest strength. Healing transforms empathy into discernment. You begin to see where your energy is needed and where it is being drained. You begin to choose consciously how you engage with others. You no longer feel compelled to rescue everyone because you realize that each soul has its own path, its own necessary encounters with pain and transformation. You stop trying to save people who are not ready to be saved. Instead, you offer presence, wisdom, and the example of your own healed energy. Let me share another image with you. Imagine a candle flame. When the wind is too strong, the flame flickers, struggling to stay alive. This is the empath who is exposed to every gust of other people's emotions. But if the candle is placed inside a lantern, it continues to shine steadily, protected by its own container. Healing is the lantern. It is the boundary that allows your light to shine without being extinguished. Without it, you will spend your life trying to relight your flame after every storm. There is a temptation among empaths to believe that healing means becoming less sensitive, less open, but this is not true. Healing does not harden you, it strengthens you. It allows you to remain sensitive without being overwhelmed. It teaches you that you can feel deeply without losing yourself. It is the difference between drowning in the ocean and learning to swim. The water is the same, but your relationship to it has changed. To embark on this journey, you must be willing to sit in silence with yourself. The modern world is filled with noise, with distractions that pull you away from the whispers of your soul. But healing begins in stillness. It begins when you turn inward and listen to the quiet voice beneath the surface. This voice may speak in dreams, in sudden insights, or in the ache of your body. Pay attention to it. It is the voice of the self calling you home. You may resist this call, fearing what you will find. The unconscious can be terrifying to those who have never faced it. But I promise you, what you fear is not a monster but a wounded child, waiting for your love. When you finally meet this part of yourself, when you hold it with compassion, a profound shift occurs. You no longer seek to heal others as a way of avoiding your own pain. Instead, you heal from within. And from this place of wholeness, your empathy becomes a source of true strength. The journey is long, And it will test you, but I tell you this with certainty, the moment you choose to heal, you break the chains that have bound you to the pain of others. You step out of the role of the slave and into the role of the sovereign. You are no longer at the mercy of every shadow that crosses your path. Instead, you stand as a beacon of clarity, guiding others, not by carrying their pain, but by illuminating the path to their own healing. The deeper you journey into the landscape of your own soul, the more you realize that the suffering you have absorbed from others is, in truth, a reflection of your own hidden suffering. We are drawn to what we do not understand within ourselves. And for the empath, this means that every wounded soul encountered in life becomes a mirror of the wounds left untended in childhood, in forgotten memories, in the shadows of the unconscious. Until you turn toward this reflection, until you sit face to face with the parts of you that ache for recognition, you will continue to live as a magnet for pain that is not yours. Mistaking this cycle of entanglement for compassion or purpose, the shadow does not disappear because we ignore it. On the contrary, it grows stronger, more insistent, shaping our choices and relationships with invisible threads. The empath who refuses to heal often lives in the grip of these unconscious patterns, pulled into dramas that feel inevitable and unchangeable. You will find yourself surrounded by those who take more than they give, those who sense the cracks in your boundaries and pour their unresolved pain into you. And though you may feel resentful, you continue to allow it because some part of you believes this is your role, your calling. But this belief is an illusion. True healing never asks you to abandon yourself for the sake of others. It asks you to become whole so that your presence itself becomes healing, not through sacrifice, but through embodiment. Imagine a dream where you are standing at the edge of a vast, dark forest. You are afraid because the forest is alive with shadows, with whispers of things you cannot see. Yet there is a voice calling you inward, urging you to step beyond the edge, to face what lies hidden beneath the canopy. This forest is the symbol of the unconscious, and every empath must one day enter it. The shadows you fear are your own emotions, your own unhealed wounds waiting to be met. If you run from the forest, you will carry its fear with you. But if you walk through the darkness with courage, you will discover that the forest is also filled with light, with hidden treasures, with parts of your soul that you have forgotten. This is the work of individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are. Beyond the masks and roles you have learned to play, for the empath, individuation means no longer being defined by the suffering of others. It means stepping out of the role of savior and into the role of witness. To witness another's pain without being consumed by it is a profound act of love. It is to see them as they are while remaining anchored in who you are. But this anchoring can only come from inner healing, from facing your own shadow with radical honesty. There is a temptation to believe that empathy is always noble, always virtuous. But empathy without boundaries is not noble, it is destructive. It erases the self, turning you into a vessel for the unresolved emotions of others. I have seen empaths lose themselves completely, their identities dissolving into the needs and wounds of those around them. They become like ghosts, haunting their own lives, existing only to soothe the pain of others while their own souls wither. This is not the destiny of the empath. You were not born to be a ghost. You were born to be a bridge between worlds, a living symbol of understanding. But the bridge must have structure, or it will collapse under the weight it carries. The archetype of the healer is often misunderstood. People think that to heal means to suffer endlessly for the sake of others. But the true healer archetype is not a martyr. It is a figure of strength, one who has faced their own suffering and emerged with wisdom. The wounded healer who remains unhealed is caught in the shadow side of this archetype, where the compulsion to help others is driven by a secret desire to mend oneself. When this compulsion is unconscious, it leads to burnout, resentment, and a life of servitude. The path forward is to transform this compulsion into conscious choice. To say, I choose when and how to give, because I have first given to myself. Let me tell you another story, a symbolic tale from the unconscious. A man once came to me with a recurring dream. In this dream, he was carrying a heavy sack on his back, so heavy that he could barely walk. He believed the sack contained the needs of everyone he loved, the weight of their suffering. One night, he decided to open the sack. To his surprise, it was not filled with their pain, but with stones cold, unyielding stones with his own name carved into them. These were his unacknowledged wounds, his own burdens that he had projected onto others. This dream revealed a truth we must all face often. What we try to heal in others is what we most desperately need to heal in ourselves. The empath healing begins when you stop asking, how can I fix them, and start asking, what in me is calling out for healing? This shift is transformative. It takes you from a place of helpless absorption to a place of empowered awareness. You begin to see that the pain you absorb is not just theirs, it resonates with something in your own soul. And as you tend to your own wounds, as you integrate your own shadow, you no longer feel the same compulsion to rescue. You can stand in the presence of suffering without losing yourself, because you have learned to hold your own pain with grace. To do this, you must learn the language of your own psyche. Dreams, synchronicities, sudden emotional reactions, these are all messages from the unconscious guiding you toward what needs healing. Pay attention to the moments when you feel inexplicably heavy after being with someone. Ask yourself, what did their pain awaken in me? Did I feel unseen, unworthy, or powerless? These are clues to the parts of yourself that need your attention. Every trigger is a teacher. Every emotional reaction a doorway to deeper understanding. There is a paradox in this work. The more you heal, the more sensitive you may become, but this sensitivity no longer overwhelms you. It becomes a tool of insight, a way of perceiving the hidden patterns beneath the surface of life. You begin to see not just the pain of others, but also the archetypal forces that shape that pain, the ancestral wounds, the collective shadows, the stories that bind generations. You see the larger tapestry, and in seeing it, you find freedom. You no longer take on the weight of the world, because you understand that the world's pain is not yours to carry. You are here to illuminate it, to hold space for it, but not to be consumed by it. When you heal, your energy changes. You no longer attract those who feed on your openness because they sense the strength of your boundaries. You no longer feel guilty for saying no, because you understand that every no to others is a yes to your own soul. You become rooted like a tree that does not bend to every passing storm. Your empathy becomes an offering rather than a sacrifice. People feel safe around you, not because you take the pain away, but because your presence reminds them of their own capacity to heal. This transformation is not a single moment, but a series of awakenings. You may find yourself grieving as you release the old patterns of overgiving. You may feel lost, wondering who you are if you are no longer the one who carries everyone's pain. But this emptiness is sacred. It is a space where your true self begins to emerge, no longer defined by the suffering of others. You will discover that there is power in stillness, in simply being rather than constantly doing. This is the power of the self, the archetype of wholeness, which holds all opposites in harmony. I urge you to create practices that nourish this connection to the self. Spend time in solitude, not as an escape, but as a return to your own center. Write down your dreams, for they are maps of the unconscious, revealing the paths you must walk. Engage in rituals that honor your boundaries, perhaps lighting a candle at the start of the day, symbolizing your intention to keep your energy clear. These small acts of self-care are not indulgences. They are essential steps on the path to healing. There is a profound liberation that comes when you finally turn inward and choose to heal. It is as if you are stepping out of a dream in which you have been carrying everyone else's shadows, only to realize that the weight was never truly yours. This awakening is not sudden or violent. It unfolds like dawn, slowly illuminating the forgotten landscapes of your soul. You begin to see that much of your suffering as an empath was born not from the world itself, but from the way you absorb the world without discernment. Without the shield of inner knowing, healing is the act of remembering that you are not a vessel for everyone's pain, but a mirror of truth, capable of reflecting both light and shadow without becoming enslaved to either. The world will not always understand this transformation. Those who have relied on your endless giving may resist, for they have grown accustomed to feeding on your energy. They may call you cold, distant, or unkind when you begin to set boundaries, but these accusations are not a reflection of your heart. They are the echoes of their own discomfort. When you heal, you no longer enable the patterns of dependency that have bound you to others. You begin to relate from a place of wholeness, not need. This shift may feel lonely at first, but it is a sacred loneliness. The solitude of someone who has stepped into their true self. As you move deeper into your healing, you will notice that your dreams begin to change. No longer will you dream of drowning in other people's sorrows or carrying burdens too heavy to bear. Instead, you may dream of standing on a high mountain, looking out over a vast landscape, feeling the strength of the earth beneath your feet. This is the psyche's way of telling you that you have reclaimed your center. The mountain is a symbol of the self, the archetype of inner stability and vision. It reminds you that you are not defined by the suffering around you, but by the clarity within you. The path of individuation requires courage, because it is a path of becoming fully yourself, even when that self is not what the world expects. For the empath, this means reclaiming the power that was lost in childhood, when your sensitivity was both your gift and your wound. Perhaps you learned that your feelings were too much, that your presence had to be shaped around the moods and needs of others. And so you became hyper-attuned, scanning every room for unspoken pain, absorbing every unexpressed emotion. This survival strategy became your identity, but it is not who you truly are. It is merely a defense, a mask worn by the inner child who once felt unseen and unsafe. To heal, you must meet the child with love. Sit with them in your mind's eye. Ask them what they needed but never received. Listen to their answers, even if they come as images or feelings rather than words. When you begin to nurture this part of yourself, you will no longer feel compelled to heal everyone else. You will understand that your first and greatest responsibility is to your own soul, and in loving yourself, you create a foundation from which true compassion can flow, compassion that does not drain you but enriches you. There is an ancient alchemy in this process. Just as lead is transformed into gold, your wounds become wisdom when you face them fully. The very sensitivity that once enslaved you becomes a source of deep insight, allowing you to perceive the hidden currents beneath the surface of life. But now, instead of being carried away by those currents, you learn to navigate them. You become a conscious participant in the dance between self and other, between inner and outer worlds. You no longer see empathy as a curse, but as a finely tuned instrument, one that requires care, balance, and mastery. I often speak of the archetypal journey, the heroic path of descent and return. For the empath, this journey is not about slaying dragons or conquering external enemies. It is about facing the inner dragons, the voices of unworthiness, guilt, and fear, and realizing that they are not enemies at all, but guardians of your own power. These dragons hold the keys to your deepest truths. When you face them, when you listen to what they are trying to teach you, they transform. What once seemed like darkness becomes a source of strength, a wellspring of clarity. In this way, healing is not the erasure of pain, but the integration of it. You do not become whole by discarding your wounds, but by embracing them as part of your story. Every scar, every shadow, every moment of being overwhelmed by the suffering of others, these are not signs of weakness, but of your deep capacity to feel. And when you pair that capacity with awareness, you become something extraordinary, a soul who can walk through the fires of life without being burned. The empath who was healed is not detached or indifferent. On the contrary, they feel even more deeply, but their feeling is grounded, rooted in the strength of the self. They can sit with someone in pain without trying to fix them, without absorbing their suffering, because they understand that true healing arises not from rescuing, but from presence. To simply witness another's journey with compassion and without judgment, that is the highest form of empathy. And it is only possible when you are no longer enslaved to your own unhealed wounds. As you listen to these words, perhaps you feel the stirrings of recognition within you. Perhaps you sense that you have been living in a cycle of giving and suffering, mistaking self-sacrifice for love. If so, let this be your invitation to step onto the path of healing. Begin by asking yourself, what is mine and what is not mine? What pain belongs to me and what pain have I inherited, absorbed, or taken on without question? This act of discernment is powerful. It is like clearing the fog from a mirror so that you can finally see your own reflection. You may find it helpful to work with symbols, for the unconscious speaks in symbols. Light a candle and imagine that its flame represents your true self bright, steady, untouchable. Visualize a boundary of light around you, not as a wall, but as a sacred space, allowing only what is true and nourishing to enter. When you feel the weight of another suffering pressing in, return to this image. Remember that your light does not diminish by shining for yourself first. In fact, the more you tend to your own flame, the more you can illuminate the world around you. One of the greatest myths of empathy is that you must always be available, always open, always giving. But even the sun sets, even the moon disappears into shadow. There is a rhythm to life, a cycle of giving and receiving, of expansion and rest. When you honor this rhythm, you no longer burn out. You understand that your energy is sacred, that you have the right to protect it. And when you give from a place of fullness rather than depletion, your empathy becomes radiant, unstoppable. Let me leave you with this final truth. You are not here to carry the world. You are here to know yourself, to embody the wholeness that lies beneath all suffering. When you heal, you do not become less empathic, you become more powerful, because your empathy is no longer a wound, but a gift wielded with wisdom. You can stand in the presence of pain and not flinch, not because you are hardened, but because you are whole. And from this place of wholeness, you will see that every soul must walk its own path, face its own shadows, and claim its own light. Do not fear this journey. It will change you. Yes, it will strip away the illusions that have kept you small, but it will also reveal the truth of who you are, a being of depth, of vision, of extraordinary resilience. You are not a slave to other people's pain. You are a mirror of their potential, a witness to the light that exists even in the darkest places. When you heal, you become the lantern that lights the way, not by carrying their burdens, but by showing them that they too can find their own strength. So I say to you now, turn inward. Listen to the whispers of your soul. Do not run from the shadows. for they hold the treasure you have been seeking. And when you find that treasure, when you embrace the totality of who you are, your empathy will no longer be a chain, but a key that unlocks not just your own freedom, but the freedom of all who cross your path.